So you've probably heard of this little thing called Gen AI, right?
Generative AI.
Generative AI.
Gen AI.
These Gen AI.
But you might be thinking, well, I'm a developer, I'm a DevOps engineer, I work with cloud infrastructure. How can this directly benefit me? In this video, I'll be talking about Amazon Q Developer and how you can leverage it to increase your development efficiency. Specifically, I'll be focusing on the infrastructure as code support for Terraform. I'm Kevon Mayers and I'm a solutions architect. Let's hop right into it. So Amazon Q, what is it really? Well, it's a generative AI or Gen AI powered assistant from AWS. It's available where you work, so in things like the AWS documentation, the AWS console, IDEs, and more. Now there's a few different flavors of Amazon Q, but today we'll be focusing on Amazon Q Developer. I don't know about you, but I'm always looking for ways to optimize my time and increase my development efficiency. And Amazon Q Developer helps you with just that. From coding to testing, updating applications, diagnosing errors, or optimizing your AWS resources, Amazon Q's got you covered. Now, that's enough about what it is. Let's hop into a demo and show you how it works. Alright, so I'm in VSCode, that's what I'm going to be using today, and you can see I have a really bare bones Terraform project. Just a couple files. I have a main.tf file that's empty, providers.tf where I have some providers that I want to use, so the AWS and AWS CC provider for Terraform, and then I have a variables.tf file that is empty. So all that looks good, right? Nothing fancy there. Now what you're going to want to do if you don't have this installed, we're going to make sure you have the Terraform extension for VSCode installed. It's going to give you some nice things like syntax highlighting, underlines if there's any errors in your code. So to do that, we're going to click the extensions icon. So just hover over this and you'll be able to see it. And we can search for Terraform. And we're going to click the HashiCorp Terraform one. I already have this installed, so I'm not going to reinstall this, but what you would effectively see is a little install button if you don't have it installed. So go ahead and install that. That way, like I said, you get the syntax highlighting, you get the underlines, really helpful features. So since I already have that, the next thing that we're going to need to do to install Amazon Q Developer is to install that related extension. So similar to with the Terraform one, we're going to type Amazon Q. And then we'll see Amazon Q here, right? So we can click install. And then you can see we now have a little Amazon Q button, but it has an X and it's red. If we click that, you can see we actually need to sign in to get started. So we can do that. We'll click that. And I'll expand this window just to have it a little bit more readable. You can see we have two options for signing in. So the great thing with Amazon Q Developer is that there's actually a free tier and you actually don't even need an AWS account to get started. So that's what we're going to use here. You could use a pro license if you had that and you want to pay and have some additional functionality, but for what we'll be doing today, the free tier is going to be more than enough. So we're going to click this and click continue. And there's going to be a pop-up to open this in our browser because we need to actually sign in with what's called an AWS Builder ID. So you can see here, create an AWS Builder ID. So go ahead and do that if you don't already have one, but I already have one. So I'm going to click sign in and I'll sign in with my Builder ID and my authentication. Okay, and click sign in. And then you're going to be prompted with a window where you effectively just need to allow access for Amazon Q Developer to VSCode through that extension. So that's what you need to click allow access for. And then we can go back to our VSCode. Once you get this request approved, everything is good. So I will go back to VSCode. And now you can see we have a helpful little chat window, right? So this is Amazon Q Chat. You can ask it questions, explain selected lines of code, or generate some code. Let's actually use this to generate some Terraform code. So I'll close this little tab for the extension because we don't need that. And say I want to write Terraform code that creates an S3 bucket and allows EC2 access to it. Push enter, and it's going to generate some code for us. So we'll give this a little bit of time. And you can see not only, we'll expand this out a little bit more just so it's more readable, but not only does it give you the code, it gives you some helpful inline comments. It gives you some explanations on what it's actually doing as well. So you can see here, we would create that S3 bucket. You would then need an IAM role for your EC2 instance to access the S3 bucket. You can see the trust relationship, which basically says, hey, EC2 is going to be allowed to assume this role. So it already gives you that identifier for you. And then it's going to create the IAM policy that would allow access to S3. And you can see it's actually scoped, right? So it's following the principle of least privilege, and it's only granting access for these specific actions to the specific bucket that it's creating, or it's generated the code for. And then you could see, there would be the IAM role policy attachment. So attaching the policy to the role. And then you would see that for EC2, if you're familiar with it, you also need an instance profile to actually associate that role to the instance. And then finally, you have an EC2 instance. So all of that it generated from really a simple prompt. And there's a helpful button where you can either copy and paste it, or you can just press insert at cursor. So I'm going to make sure I'm in my main.tf file, and I'm going to click insert at cursor. Now you can see it's put in all of that code for us, right? It has the S3 bucket, it's referencing things where we need, and it's really giving us what we need to create what we asked, right? And it's giving you a nice little comment here that you could add some additional instance configuration if you desire, right? So I'm gonna actually remove this. We don't need this ACL for private because S3 buckets are private by default. So all this looks good to me. Now, of course, if you're familiar with S3 or simple storage service, you know that bucket names need to be globally unique. So there's a couple of things that you would need to change, right? You would need to replace this with a globally unique value. You can modify naming like your EC2 role and, maybe your policy name, but really helpful that it's giving you all of that, with a simple command. Now, say if you're not familiar with, Terraform, say you're new and you kind of just want to get started and you want to actually provision these resources, you can ask it how to do that. So we can say, what commands do I need to run to create the resources with Terraform? And we'll let it generate an answer. And you can see here it's giving us the steps that we need to take. So first we would need to do Terraform init. It tells you what it does. Then you would need to do Terraform plan to kind of give you that execution plan and show you what changes would be made. And then finally Terraform apply. And it even shows you these are the order that you would need to run these in. And you could even click insert at cursor if you select it in your terminal to paste those in. And then it shows you after running Terraform apply, what is it going to create? Gives you some other helpful commands that you could run after Terraform apply. So Terraform show, Terraform output, and then Terraform destroy to clean up everything, right? So really helpful that it can give you that information. Now, say if we want to do something a little bit different. So I'm going to delete all this. Another way you can generate code with Amazon Q Developer in Terraform is as long as you're in a file that is a Terraform file, so ending in .tf, you basically just put a comment in and you give the prompt there. So say if, and you start that with a hashtag or a £sign or a sharp, depending on if you're a musician or not. But that's what you need to start to, start the comment and know that this is going to be, or let Q know that this is going to be a prompt that you're asking it. And I want to say, create a VPC using a Terraform module with 2 public and 2 private subnets. Insider range, and we'll say like 10.0.0.0/16. Now to run, to have it generated, you can either move to the next line in the code. So I could do shift and return, or you can actually do option and C to have it generate on demand. So I'll let it auto generate. So I'm going to hold down shift and push return or enter, depending on if you're on Mac or Windows, and let it generate it. And you can see here, it does just that. It gives you a little preview in gray to show you what it is proposing. To accept it, you can press tab, or to reject it, you can push escape. But that looks good to me, so I'm going to push tab. And you can see it's created it, right? It has our module definition. It's using a VPC Terraform module. It's defining the CIDR range that we asked it to in the prompt. And it actually created those 2 public and 2 private subnets within that same CIDR range. You can even see it's intelligent enough to understand that since we have private subnets, we likely would want a NAT gateway to allow those to have access to the internet. And some things you might not necessarily need. You might not need a single NAT gateway. I would have to look at the module to see what this specific variable would do. But you can see it's giving you a really helpful starting point. So that's good, but what if we don't want to use hard-coded values? What if we want to, instead of strings, we want to have variables? We can remove this and actually just modify our prompt to tell it to do that. So we're going to keep the same prompt, but we're just going to say use variables. And then we can go to the next line and we'll let it generate and see what it does. And you can see what it's actually done now is giving us, and again, we can push tab to accept it, but it's giving us the same module configuration, right? We're using a VPC module, but it's replaced those strings with variables. Now, if we click save, you can see we have some errors, and that's because we're referencing variables that are not declared in the configuration files anywhere. You can also use Terraform, you can use Amazon Q Developer to generate those Terraform variables for you as well. So if I go to a new line and start typing variable and push space, and maybe we start to add a variable for the VPC name. So maybe VPC name, and then we open the curly brace, and you can see it's giving us some inline recommendations of what that could be. So if we push tab, you can see a recommendation there, and we could modify this name if we want. So say if I want to call this Keyvon VPC, okay? And then say we need to create something else, right? That fixed our first issue. Now we need to create a VPC CIDR. So if we push enter, and you can see without me even doing anything, it's recommending that, hey, you created the VPC name, you fixed that issue. Now you need to create the variable for the VPC CIDR. So I can just push tab to accept that, push enter or return to go to the next line, let it generate. And then it's giving us the recommendation that I can, approve for a string using that same range that we defined that we want to be for the VPC CIDR. And we continue on, right? We can push return, and it's showing us that the VPC AZs. And a good thing about this, you can see that it's even intelligent enough. I'll go ahead and accept this, but since we have AZs with an S, it understands the context that, hey, that would be a list because we want multiple of the same item, right? We don't want an AZ, a single, availability zone. And it's built that out for us as well. We'll continue on. We have the private subnets, and it again knows that it's a subnets, not a single subnet. So that's going to be a list of strings. Continue on, and it's going to do the public subnets. I'm just doing tab and enter, honestly, right? And then we have that NAT gateway, and then it knows that that's a Boolean value, and we're going to set that to true. We can modify that if we want. And then finally, we're going to have the VPC tags, and we can let it, create a map of strings, and let us show that, again, we have that key value pair that we would need. So we have a Terraform equals true, environment equals dev, but we can modify that. So that's honestly, it's a huge lift, right? Without even me having context into what's necessary for the specific module, Amazon Q Developer is really helping me, to build that stuff out. So a huge time saver. So let's try something else. Say if I want to do something a little bit more complex like looping, I can write another prompt that says create 3 S3 buckets named, we can say maybe Keyvon 1, Keyvon 2, and Keyvon 3. And then I can say loop with for each. And then I can go to the next line and see what it would recommend. And again, if for whatever reason it doesn't, you can have it do it on demand by doing Option C if you're on Mac. So let's go to this. And I probably need to change this to 3 S3 buckets so it knows that it's trying to do that. There we go. So create 3 S3 buckets, because again, showing that it would be multiple, so it knows that multiple buckets, these are the values for the 3 buckets, and then loop through them with the for each. So you can see AWS 3 bucket and then Keyvon. So it's giving that recommendation, you know, just because of the naming that I use. So I can push tab to accept that, go to the next line. And then you can see if I accept that, it's actually using the for each. So it's doing a for each to set, and then it's putting in the 3 values that I told it to do. Now again, I can remove this ACL and then maybe say I don't want versioning, but even just that, and two is showing us that it's referencing each dot value. If you haven't used for each, that's how you reference each specific value, so it knows to loop for each item, put in that value and assign it as the bucket name as it loops through. But say even further, right, like kind of showing the inline, but then getting back to the chat for a queue. What if you don't know how for each works and you want to learn? Let's ask it. So how does for each work in Terraform? Let's ask that and let it generate an answer. And you can see here, right? So Terraform, the for each meta arguments used to create multiple instances of a resource based off a set of values. So instead of me having to copy and paste a resource definition for an S3 bucket 3 times, I can pass in 3 values and have it loop through. It gives you a nice little, example of what you have to do first, how you define things, how you loop through it, all that good stuff, right? And it even shows you how if you want to output this, how you can loop through those values with an output. So really helpful that like it can just do that, right? It's I know when I was first learning Terraform and there's just a lot to get under my head. It was a really time-consuming process of having to go through the documentation, watching videos, and really trying to go through multiple sources on my own to manually try to figure out how things should be working. But having this functionality where you can literally ask it in the chat, you can put in prompts, you can start to do things more inline and start to see the recommendations it gives you. Like honestly, I would say just try this out. It's almost like it's thinking of your next thought before you even get there. Like it's kind of weird to think about it that way, but it's really what's is happening, right? It's giving me those recommendations with the context of the code. So the last thing that I want to show is, say you want to do a little bit of troubleshooting, right? So let's run Terraform plan and let's see what happens. Now it gives us an error that module not yet installed, and of course Terraform being helpful with the error messages, it tells us what it needs to do. But say if it was something a little bit more obscure and you weren't really sure what this means, again we can use Amazon Q to figure out what we need to do. So what does the error, and then we'll paste in a string with the error message, mean, and how do I fix it? And we'll run this. So it's going to generate that answer, and you can see it gives us some issues for what this could actually be, right? So in this case, you could see the module source. Maybe that could be an issue. We need to install the module, so hey, we need to do a Terraform init. It could show maybe some version constraints, things like that, right? So it gives you and points you in the right direction for how it actually would you would go through troubleshooting the specific issue. So let's try Terraform init and see if that resolves it. Terraform init. And lo and behold, it initializes the backend, it pulls down our module, it initializes the provider plugins, and in a couple more seconds, we have Terraform has been successfully initialized. Okay, and then we can say maybe how do I create a plan? Or let's say, what does the command Terraform plan do? And we'll just wait a couple seconds to get a response. And it shows us here, Terraform plan is used to create an execution plan that shows the changes Terraform applied to the infrastructure. So let's give that a whirl. Terraform plan. It is giving us an error because I did not save my file. Make sure you save your files. So we'll run this again. We're going to do a Terraform plan. And you can see here, no valid credential sources found. So let's ask what that means, right? I really want to show you kind of the whole workflow of how you can kind of troubleshoot and use Q, not only just for development, but also resolving issues. So what does the error, paste this in, no valid credential sources found mean, and how do I fix it? So we could paste this in. It's going to generate an answer. And you can see here, missing AWS credentials, maybe incorrect credential source, and it shows you how you could use access key ID and secret access key to define those kind of things. So yeah, it's really giving you, check your AWS CLI configuration, IAM permissions. It gives you steps to kind of go through the troubleshoot. So I know this error is happening. I mean, you know, is going to be because we haven't assumed any AWS credentials, right? So I can do that by authenticating in the, I have the AWS command line interface installed. So I'm going to go ahead and authenticate with my credentials. Okay, so I've authenticated with my credentials, and now let's rerun Terraform plan. And you can see here, now it gives us our execution plan. So we are going to create the bucket. It can show us looping us through those successfully. So Keyvon bucket 1, Keyvon 1, Keyvon 2, Keyvon 3. And let's actually modify these. I don't know if there's a bucket named Keyvon 1, 2, and 3, but we'll just say Keyvon 1, Terraform, Q test. And then I'll tack this on to all the buckets just to try to make sure it's something that's going to be globally unique. And that should be good. We'll run another plan so that updates and just shows us what those changes are going to be. So we have the bucket names, Keyvon 3, Terraform, Q test, all that looks good. And then finally we can run Terraform apply. And then we can tack on that dash auto approve. That way we don't have to type yes. We'll let it create those resources, and now we have successfully created it. So we've used Amazon Q Developer to not only create our resources or create the code that we need to make those resources, we've used it to troubleshoot issues that we were running into and how to resolve it. And we finally successfully applied those resources to AWS. So next, let's see how we would go about destroying our resources. So you can see this is a nice little, preview of what you could do. If you ever feel like the chat's getting a little bit too busy and you want to clear it out, you can push slash and then you can do clear and run that and it clears it. Let's now say, what command do I run to destroy resources with Terraform? Okay, and it's showing us, hey, we need to use that Terraform destroy command. So we can go ahead and type that in, destroy, and then we can tack on that dash auto approve so we don't have to type yes. And it's showing us what it's going to destroy, and now it's cleaned it up. So I don't know about you, but this is a huge time saver for me, especially when I was first learning Terraform, kind of the steps that I need to take, how do I troubleshoot issues, things like that. Having this combination of not only the chat, but also that inline functionality is a huge time saver. And I'm really excited to see this feature out. So hopefully that gave you a good understanding of Amazon Q Developer and its capabilities in terms of infrastructure as code. But that's really just scratching the surface. I highly encourage you to try out Amazon Q Developer and see how it can help improve your development workflows. If you found this video helpful, feel free to like, comment, and share it, and subscribe to this channel to stay up to date with new video uploads. That's all for this one. I'll see you in the next. Peace.